Hi, I'm Jerry Parisi, and welcome to our brand new show, All Lives Matter, right here on Madhousetv. There are approximately 39,000 New York City uniformed policemen, and of that elite group of policemen, there's approximately 45 to 5,000 detectives. Many of those detectives go on in their life after they retire to become private investigators. No better training for any private investigator to have worked for the greatest police department in the world, the New York City Police Department. Today, myself and Madhousetv are truly proud to bring you our new premiere show, All Lives Matter. It is hosted by former detective Vito Bruno of the New York City Police Department. And now, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce a detective that truly made a difference in the force. Ladies and gentlemen, Vito Bruno. Vito, I'm so proud to hand you over your show.
Thank you, Jerry.
And I'm so proud to have you as a friend as well.
Thank you very much, very much. I'm glad to be here today, the start of this new job that I'm having in the show business of producing my own All Lives Matter and the power of the PI world, and I'm glad to be here today. I'd like to start off by where I came from originally. I was born and raised in East Harlem, which was predominantly an Italian section of New York. I lived with my mother there. My father had passed away at a young age. It was a tough area, but it was a lot of respect in that area. And I grew up in that area, like I say, and then as time went on, I joined the Continental Insurance Company. I worked a little bit to help my mother out. And then finally, I decided to go into the New York City Police Department. And with that, I started to work in different units. I was a foot patrolman. From there, I went into plainclothes division. I worked in anti-crime. I even worked at some time at this, what they call applicant investigation unit. And then from there on, I went into the detective bureau. I worked in the criminal investigation unit. And then eventually, I went into the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, which was looked at as the most elite unit in the police department. I was so gratified and so pleased that they accepted me. It was just a small unit, but we had the most high, dense type investigations that you could imagine. I worked in there several years. Now, over during my career, I worked in several areas throughout New York. I worked in Queens, Manhattan, and Brooklyn. And in Brooklyn, I worked in a couple of precincts in Brooklyn. I got to know quite a few people out there in the community. In the detective bureau, you have to get close to the community, otherwise the function is not there. Even though I worked with, I'm telling you, some greatest people that I've ever worked with, and I was there in Brooklyn, I did work with these fellas and women, but the community was always behind us most of the time, and they helped us out tremendously. So I was so gratified that the working relationship with the community was always that good. When I finally got into the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, I worked with a lot of major situations in fraud, money laundering operations, but not only that, but I looked at the point of progressing even beyond that. I decided from in that system to work with other units in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, and eventually put me into organized crime unit, which I worked there for a few years. And in 1991, I retired after 23 years. I had a great career with the New York City Police Department. I met some excellent, excellent people. And again, we worked together very handily over the years. And the good part was we all stay in touch. But then from then on, I went into the private investigative world, which obviously I probably know best. I can't even handle put a painting up on the wall. So this was my career, I suppose. It just turned out to be something gratifying to me. When I went into the PI world, it took a little time, but the private investigative world and the PD are kind of somewhat parallel in some degree, although we don't have the power that they have. But we did really good jobs, and a lot of that work was similar in a lot of respect. So it turned out that I worked with this PI world for quite a long years, and I met up with a lot of different clients. Every situation is always different, but a lot of it focuses almost on the same topic, except like in Dragnet, if you ever watch Dragnet, the names have changed to protect the innocent. A lot of times it's the same case, but the names have changed. And it was gratifying to me because I put my experience into working. I always try to put 100% into everything I did, not to give it 50% or 75%. I give it 100 or nothing. And that's what I always try to explain to all the people out there, that I would give the best that I could. Sometimes you don't accomplish it, but you do and you try your best out there. That's all you can say with these cases. I've worked for many years in the PI world. I met a lot of different organizational people. I've worked in corporate operations, private citizens. I worked with even sometimes political people. I've done some major cases throughout the PI world. And I'm so gratified to be in that world because it took time to establish myself. And I feel today that I'm kind of like in the rock of doing the best I can, and people know me of what I do. And so kind of like my name got out there pretty well. And I think that it's only based on your character, based on your reputation. And that always follows you wherever you go. From the moment you get out into the world, your reputation's with you. I don't care how you feel, but that's the way I always realized, even from the police department. And again, I met so many interesting people out there and a lot of experienced people. But the main thrust is working with the community. As a detective, I did a lot of major cases in New York. And the community sometimes came up in the front lines to help us out a lot to solve possibly these crimes. And I was gratified that these people had come forward to help us out. And so all this kind of background and experience, I continue to do it to this day. I have an office in Forest Hills, Queens, and I'm proud that a lot of people that I've met are contacting me today, the clients from years ago, and they're just passing me along to other people. And so that basically was the network. But the whole key was all my experience in the New York City Police Department. I can only say my hat is off to those people. The members of the police department are phenomenal. I met with the most experienced people out there. And they always said, try to learn a little bit from everybody. And even with the foot patrolman, as opposed to the detective, sometimes the foot patrolman even knew a lot more than the detective. And it just depends on what status they're in. And some of these fellas just wanted to stay the way they are and didn't want to get promoted. And I kind of like enjoyed their response to things. And I took a little from everybody. And that's how I got to myself. And I'm so gratified that I'm doing. I'm also proud that to this day that unfortunately my parents passed away, but I wish they were here to see this time for me. But I can only say that this is related to my wife for 47 years right now. I have 2 grown daughters, and I love them all. I have 3 grandchildren, and I pass the little police stuff to them every so often. They see a lot on TV, and they ask me if that was me, if I handled that. And some things I do, and sometimes I don't, but I put it into it anyway. What did they know until they grow up a little older? But I'm so happy that things have gone the right way for me, and I hope it continues. I am really gratified that I'm able to put this on the network to show who I am. I'm gratified to you, Jerry, for doing a great thing for me. And the way we had met was just ironic, the right place at the right time. And you and your wife, obviously, Michelle, and I'm so grateful for that. But I have a lot to do with the future, with the shows. I have a lot of experienced people that are coming on, different topics such as bullying, pedophiles, gangs, drug-related, especially in certain areas now in Nassau and Suffolk County, which has hit pretty well. This is a big topic in school security. I'm trying to get people that have gotten more professionalized into that field than I am, even though I know some things, but I'm going to get more professional people on it. And I also have some people that are professionals in dealing with children need help, such as autism and things of that nature. So we're just going to try the best we can that works for the communities. And that's really where my focus is, even as a PI, because a lot of my cases come from the PI end, and they work into personal things within the family. I've seen it so many times, and when I hear things from the family, if I could be of assistance, I certainly would be. Whatever I can do, I can do. And that's the way I've always been, and sometimes it comes back tenfold for me. So I'm only interested in helping the people, and if I can do something, my heart's out to everybody. I do know a lot of people that have had some serious problems, and we try to do the best we can. But my whole experience is here in the PI world, and I'm looking forward to doing other shows that are going to be coming up really soon, and I'm hopeful that these things will still be shown and that you people will be watching us too, and I hope and pray that this show will continue on with other shows, and you'll have the same feelings that we have in this particular show. So I'm really happy to be here today to show a little background of myself and to show you what I've gotten into and where I am today, and I'm so grateful. And that's all I could really say in my life, that things have gone the right way, and I hope it continues the right way.
Well, I got to tell you, the excitement that this is generating, it's really the first police show here on Madhouse TV. And I know from our meetings every week that we'll be planning a lot of interesting visuals, such as things like the bullying. And as you talk about it, they'll be outlined. And such things as the different work that the PI does will be visualized as well. So it's not just going to be a talk show, it's going to be a talk show with visual aids. And that's an exciting thing, especially in the world of the police department in a general umbrella form. Vito, you've got a tremendous amount of experience on the force and from so many different areas. I guess that your natural way of life would have gone to being a PI, and I suppose anybody who comes to the Bruno Investigations company would probably be doing themselves well when they hire a PI to do things. Now, when do you know? We'll veer off a second. But when do you know when you need to hire a PI, and how does that translate into our show as part B of that same question?
Well, each case, of course, is different, but when I get brought into something and I have to analyze it very carefully with the client, it's troubling for them sometimes. They don't know if, in fact, that the private investigator is needed for this, unless they have an attorney and there's some situation in court that the attorney might say, prevail, that we wanted a private investigator involved with here. But a lot of times it's just the individual that just doesn't know what we have to do, what's our part into this thing. And I'll try to describe it as best as I can. And if I could see that it's more of a benefit for me to get involved, I will say so. Or if I say if the attorney be more of a benefit for this thing rather than me. But most times I can convince them in this sense that I think my roadway could be helpful to you in the long run. So why don't you stick with me, and I think we can work something out with this.
And so I guess the part B of that question is, to the studio audience and to the home audience, you basically be explaining the different reasons why things like that would happen and why you might or might not be needed on a situation such as that. I want to ask you another thing. We were down over at American Express earlier last week. We got some very interesting things. So I guess by the way you're coming together, you not only handle what people would imagine a PI handles, which would be home and a cheater or embezzlement or family robbing family, you also handle big corporations as well. How does that differ, and how are we going to show that to the audience?
Well, a lot of it has to do with the corporations. They have a lot of sometimes internal problems, that they might have their own field investigators to do internal investigative work. Sometimes that could be dealt by them, but a lot of times they outsource it to private investigators like ourselves. And it's very intriguing because they all have different types of problems. If something that is a nature that they bring me into, that I might not be able to guarantee that I can work with this, then I certainly would bring somebody in that be more of an expertise in that field. Wow. Because sometimes it's all different levels, and I'm not an expert in every level, by no means. But I certainly would give the best that I could do, or for my recommendation would be the best that I can do. So, in essence, the corporations all have a very internal situation that has to be dealt with very clearly. But if these things that I can't handle, like I said, I would turn it over to more of an expert in that particular field. So
wonderful.
An individual thing would be a whole different concept to it. They don't have that corporate involvement here, and they would only have this own personal thing. But sometimes corporations are much larger in their complex problems. So that's basically it.
Oh, something happened. What happened? What happened? His mic went off? Oh, okay, hold on. Wait, let me see what happened. Yes, Vin. Okay, quick. Okay, let me have this.
Can I talk?
All right, let me know when you're up.
Can I go?
Yep.
Otherwise, continue.
Sorry about that. We had a little technical difficulty, but Vito, I was just going to ask you that next question. What do you think is more interesting to the viewing audience? Is it more the corporate work or the private work, or do you think it's a level between the two?
Well, I think the private individual is more of a domestic problem, so to speak. Variety of things with their children or their own home life. We do have an occasion, but it's picked up quite a bit, of possible domestic problems with the husband or the wife allegedly cheating on each other or something of that nature. And so we have to analyze that kind of a situation very quickly. So that, I'd say the domestic problems are probably more in tune than the corporate type work. And a lot of times it could be the child or the children that they have in their family that they want to pursue for a problem, as opposed to the corporate, which is more involved with the corporation, the working of the corporation. So there was two different elements here. But I think the private sector, the individual out there is more concerned about their own lifestyles, the drugs in the area, what's going on, gangs, things of that nature, pedophile, bullying. That's more of the interest of the areas itself that we can handle.
Right.
And a lot of it I have done already, so I'm pretty determined that I can do a lot of things to help out people in that respect.
Right. We made a commercial for you, and Vicki, if you wouldn't mind helping us with that commercial, I'd like to show this viewing audience your commercial, and then we'll be back in 2 moments. So we're back.
Yes.
That was an interesting spot, and
Yes.
little snippets. I guess that's the way we're going to show the audience things that are going to be happening.
Correct.
And those visuals are so powerful.
Yes.
But let's get back to the show itself and why this show is different than the others. And one of the things I'm proud of personally is the fact that you've reached out to have these visuals created. And I guess what we're going to be doing is assembling the visuals in different areas. Mm-hmm. So in order to do that, the people are probably wondering how we're going to do it. We're going to actually be assembling situations, such as walking through the park, why it might not be a wise idea, and we'll show a visual along those lines. Bullying, what to look for. I have never been in trouble in my whole life, so I know nothing about the world of drugs. I never even smoked a cigarette. I know nothing about bullying because, hey, I'm an Italian kid from Brooklyn. You're going to be bullying me, you're going to get right back. And that's exactly what would have happened. And some of the other things that go on that I know nothing about.
Right.
So I guess through these visuals, you're going to be teaching people what to look for. Am I right with that?
Correct, correct. The situation with the bullies is always like a group of them that always picks on the more innocent ones, and they just keep going away. And if they can get away with it, they're going to continue. And sometimes it's a tragedy out of it. That's the end result of some of these things. And hopefully it doesn't get to that far, but sometimes, the parents have to always watch their children when they come home, how their reactions are, what goes on at the school, keep in touch with the teachers. And I'm sure many of the parents do that, what I'm saying anyway. But you have to keep focus on their children. If anything abnormal develops with them, or they're crying a lot, or they just don't want to go to school, or they don't want to do this, or they're hiding from something, there is some problem going on here, and they have to be looked on immediately. And I've caught that quite a bit of times. So I understand all that. And it's a difficult thing for parents, but it has to be watched very, very carefully.
So I imagine in the case of bullying, there'll be clips for the studio audience to enjoy of children being depressed or not speaking up or hiding something within that not necessarily they've done wrong, but what's happening to them, and they just don't want to, out of embarrassment, let's say I'm being picked on. Because no kid wants to admit that he or she is being picked on for whatever reason, things like this. So I guess that's where the clips and the visuals will be going.
Mm-hmm.
That's also very, very interesting about that.
Yeah, it's a powerful thing for people to watch and to get the professionals to talk about this. And I know a lot of things are going on in schools today that there is programs for this type of situation. And there's a lot of people out there that advertise it on TV in such a way as to promote it, to make sure that everybody's interested in this more than ever. Because too many tragedies have occurred on this thing where it's too late in the game, as they might say, and we want to get to that point. So you have to catch it in midstream. It's just like drugs. You have to catch it before it gets really out of hand, if you can catch it. So all of this kind of things are the type of things that we look for and we tell. Because I've been involved with a lot of the drug stuff in the past, and so I have an idea of where that goes. And not only that, but you're talking even like just to jump the subject, like when the runners, like in Central Park, sometimes I feel, things occur out there, tragedies occur and crimes occur. It's always like that, most times like it's the wee hours of the morning. And you always have to run with 2 or 3 people. I always suggested that. But sometimes you get somebody that feels confident that they can run into an area and nothing's going to happen. But when you get into these infested little parks and things like that, where you don't see what's behind the bushes and all, that's a very scary thing. And they're out there. These characters are out there. And they have to be taken off the face of the map one way or another. And it caused tragedy to a lot. You've seen it on papers. You know there's a couple of cases right now still pending. And I just hope to God that they do catch these little pieces of worms, that they could just keep them from society once and for all. And it's a tragedy. But the whole key is some people are so determined to do things by themselves and run, and that's fine. But you're taking a chance with that thing big time. So I always try to tell some of the people that have been involved, especially in Central Park, don't go by yourself, please. 3, 4, 5 in the morning. You think it's innocent, but you know what? You're playing with roulette wheel with this thing. You're going to get caught sooner or later with a problem.
Sure.
And these characters are out there in the bushes. So
that's interesting. So basically, this show will also be able to teach people what to look for and what not to do. And maybe if you have a way of making people think twice on what they may or may not do or take for granted, that may help save a life.
Oh, absolutely. If anything we could do to just prevent something, we certainly would put into the criteria of talking and getting some experts on it. But in generality, the parents or the people that are in these families that know their child running or even themselves running or whatever they're doing, they have to get more aware of it today. Years ago we had our guard down, so to speak. Today the guard is up 10 times or 50 times. I shouldn't say 10 times. So you can't do as you did years ago. The game is over. You have to be more protective and more security alerted. And you have to be much more wiser today than ever before, because those characters are out there and they'll take you. They'll take you very easily. They're all 2-time, 3-time losers. And you see all the crimes that are committed. Unfortunately, we had a situation where 2 police officers got killed in Idaho. And now they eventually caught the individual that killed these 2 officers. And these tragedies, they are occurring too often. And in that respect, I really feel that this has been like a downplay on what is the protection of police officers out there too. So we have our own problems in this world, and it's coming to focus now more than ever. So we hope and pray that something will develop where we get more backing of this thing to the right people, and to hope and pray that we can kind of like get that smoking gun down a little bit from these idiots out there that are doing this type of thing. Because they're destroying family, destroying lives, and it should not happen at all.
That's true. So I want to just thank you for now coming onto Madhouse TV, and of course, you'll have another show right after this. In fact, basically speaking, if you're watching Madhouse TV, stick around, because there will be another show directly after this one. If you're watching us on Channel 20, then of course the next show will have aired next week. One of the important things I'd like to tell you is Vito will be guest starring on one of our other shows, and that's called Long Island in Crisis with Linda Ventura. And he'll be talking as an expert what to look for in the world of drugs before your kids get a hold of drugs. And that airs on Monday nights here on Madhouse TV. Or is that Tuesday nights?
No, Tuesday.
Tuesday nights, that's right. Tuesday nights. Tuesday nights.
November 8th.
November 8th. I'm glad you said that. Tuesday,
Election
November
night.
8th.
Election night.
Yeah, you don't want to see an election anyway. You still want to see Vito instead, of course.
We know who won.
So with that, I, on behalf of Madhouse TV, thank you for your premiere show. Stick around, everybody. We have a Detective John Piccalo coming on to our next show. So, Vito, I now turn this over to you humbly and want to thank you again.
Well, thank you again, Jerry, and it's been a pleasure. And I'm looking forward to a lot more shows to inform the community of things that I know, or to bring more professionals on to help out. Even if we could give a little token out there of our experience, and maybe it can help them in the future for whatever problems they might have. So thank you again.
Thank you. And good night from Madhouse TV. You're watching All Lives Matter. Stick around for another show.
Hi, this is Vito Bruno. All Lives Matter. We're talking today a topic of the world of private investigations. I have a special guest on today. He's a former first-grade detective. He worked in the New York City Police Department over 35 years. He's got a tremendous amount of background in the police department, and I'm so happy that he's here today. And I want to explain that, let him explain everything that he has done, not only in the police department, but in the private investigative world. For now, I'm going to introduce my good friend, John Piccalo. John, welcome aboard today.
Hi, Vito. Thanks for having me with you, and it's always a pleasure to be with another real good detective.
Thank you.
We're like water. We just gel. It's beautiful.
John, I'd like to ask you, in your career in the beginning, give us some highlights of where you've been in your career in the beginning.
Well, I had 35 years in the NYPD. I started as a patrolman in uniform in the Bedford-Stuyvesant area. I did 6 or 7 years there during the rough times with the Black Panthers, et cetera, et cetera. And then from there, I moved into plainclothes units, which covered gambling, vice, narcotics, and I was in the what they call the organized crime section for approximately 10 years, at which time I also did a little light undercover work because I sounded and looked like the guys from the other side, so to speak, the soprano type people. And it was fun, and we accomplished quite a few things. Then from there, I worked in narcotics pretty predominantly, and then to robbery. And I went on to the robbery unit, then I went on to the special frauds unit and the major case unit, the most elite unit in the PD. And there I became the jewelry expert for the NYPD, at which time I set up sting operations in different places that were buying stolen goods from these narcotic mutts, as I call them, who would go out and rob people on the street, burglarize their homes, sell it to these stores, and they would buy it without question. We pinpointed them. We sent an undercover in with a wire on, selling this thing. After several sales, we'd go in, we'll pull the place apart, lock them up, take them down.
I just want to ask you a question. Have they still have that operation in existence today, if you know?
Unfortunately, the 12 years that I was deemed the jewelry expert for the PD, when I retired, they couldn't get another person with my so-called expertise. Look, I was a detective. I called myself a defective detective. I didn't take myself serious. So,
No.
but apparently they couldn't get somebody with that expertise, and it just died a natural death.
Now, when did you retire from the PD?
I retired in 2000.
2000. And from retiring from the PD, what did you jump into?
Well, I most likely immediately segued into private eye work.
Right.
At which time I tried to take it a little easier. I'd worked 35 years, so I went for smaller companies that would take me on a per diem day basis, not a full-time basis. And I had a lot of interesting people that I worked with and cases, and I tried to stay out of the city. I was a little burnt out. And then I got, as time wore on, I went to work with bigger companies, one of the bigger companies in Manhattan. And your company yourself, as you know, we've done many things together, which came out with very fruitful endings, which was great. And I just kept moving along like that. And in between, I also found that it was, on occasion, they hired me to work bodyguard work or security work for celebrities, movie stars. And for instance, I was with Sophia Loren 2 weeks one time, and people like Anne Margaret, Dustin Hoffman when he was on Broadway, De Niro when he worked in the Raging Boulder movie, etc. And pretty interesting.
Well, you found that a lot of the work that we did in the Detective Bureau is parallel in some degree to the private investigative world.
Absolutely.
And so when you got some cases, finding people, taking statements, criminal cases, it always had some sort of parallel to what we did in the PD. Maybe not the power that we don't have with PD, of course, but we still have a lot of power that's under our rules by the state. We can do certain things in private investigative.
It definitely does. And there are some areas that we can do things that we couldn't do as NYPD or uniformed police officers. So we're limited on a little on one side, but then we have a little going on the other side. Now, for instance, you could go in and sit. I'll give you a quick, for instance. I was on a case out in the Hamptons. Very hard in those areas to sit a car out the streets on these private roads. Everybody knows. And what you have to do is you try to make yourself inconspicuous. Very hard. Then you have to be able to think. And being an NYPD detective gives you that training, that insight, thinking on your feet, being quick with the answers. People would come up to me and they'd say, "What are you doing here?" They're walking their dogs. And, you know, what do you say? You couldn't say things like, "Oh, I'm on a drug case, don't bother me," if you were on the NYPD. But you could say something like that when you weren't working for PD. For instance, one time a woman came up to me and said, "What are you doing here?" I said, it happened, there was a company fixing the TV cables on the block. I said, "Shh, don't say nothing. I'm with the cable company. We're making sure that they do the right job because your neighborhood is very important to us. You are high-paying people, and we want to make sure your service is right." Oh, they smiled and walked away. Things like that.
Yeah.
You have to be able to talk, walk, and chew gum at the same time.
When you were going back again to the PD, you worked sometimes very closely with community, especially when you had so many criminal cases. And a lot of times, I'm sure that you've had the community supporting you in a lot of different ways in these low-income areas that normally you wouldn't think that you would get support.
Right.
And that was like a fascinating thing out there because they were victims from their own people. And sometimes they said, you know, we want to help you. And so they didn't look down on us. They wanted to help you rather than hurt you. So you've gone through a lot of that, I'm sure.
Many cases like that.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I've been in where I've gone into different areas and supposedly areas of great high crime areas, the ghetto, so to speak, quote unquote. And you go in there and you ask questions and you ID yourself. Well, as a NYPD, definitely, but as a private investigator, people look at you and say, "Look, I'm trying to find this person. We think he's guilty of whatever. Would you help me?" And to my surprise, more often than not, they say, "Yeah, we'll help you," whenever they could.
Yeah.
If you talk to them and they know that you're a decent person and they're decent, and unfortunately, in all these areas, 90% of the people who live in these areas are hard-working, good citizens, and they're being preyed upon by the 10% of the people that they're living with in their actual neighborhood, and that's killing them. So they're going to be very happy to help you out, usually.
Now, John, you live in Long Island, correct?
Correct.
Do you know some of the problems that are existing out there, basically, in Long Island, that you hear on the radio or your friends, or maybe a little more insight on a lot of law enforcement people that give you a little update on what's going on out there as far as crime's concerned, whether it be narcotics or whatever?
I think that the main thing that I hear and I'm concerned about, as every other citizen that lives out there should be concerned, is drugs. Drugs, and with drugs, as a career policeman and private investigator, being involved between both over 40 years now, or 45 years, it's what bothers me the most. Because you know that the gangs are the ones that are bringing in 90% of the drugs. And it's a big, big problem. And again, this is where the police alone and the private investigation world need help from who? John Q. Citizen. We need help from the public. We are as good as the information we get. We're good by ourselves. But if we get a little help from the public, it's like hitting a double in baseball or hitting a home run. We can hit the doubles, but we need the help from the people in the neighborhood, in the community, to help us hit that home run and clear this rotten, I don't know what you want to call it, away from the streets. I'll be nice.
No, I understand what you're saying. Are you interested in you're in school systems? Do you know anybody in the school systems that have had problems as far as the security operations in schools? Because you live out there, you hear anything about security in schools out there? Have they kind of like brought it up to a better level or anything of that? If you know, have you heard anything like that?
What little I do know, I have several of our colleagues and our friends that you and I probably both know, who I frequent with. I occasionally play golf, etc., with these people, and a few of them are working as school or security people. and both advising for school securities and working in them. And what I have noticed talking to them is that they've started to have a lot more people in that area. Schools are hiring more people in the security field, in the prevention field. It's a sad commentary on the world we live in today, that our kids can't go to school and not have to have Big Brother, so to speak, watching over them and trying to keep them out of harm's way.
Do you feel, I know it's a political thing today about security and armed security in schools. There are pros and cons to this thing, and it's not a simple solution, but the problem is every time a situation occurs in this country, it gets really terrible. It's not simple. And we see it often, more often now than ever before. And it hits, and if it hits in your area, people talk about it even more so. What's your thoughts about, say, a retired law enforcement that's armed? They're going to bring in an armed person for security. What's your feelings on
Oh,
that?
my feeling is it's a home run. Because people should understand one thing. Anybody that was armed, is an armed law enforcement, put in 20, 30, 35 years in law enforcement and retired, so to speak, with an unblemished record, knows how to handle the weapons, knows what to do. He's got that training embedded in his heart and his mind. So he's not going to be reckless and put the children or anybody else in any kind of harm's way. Obviously, things happen occasionally, but what would you rather have watching your children? Would you rather have an armed law enforcement with background, or would you rather have a law enforcement who's standing there with a lollipop? What is he going to do with that? I mean, it's to me, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I also agree with that. Just to go back to the drugs and the gangs, have they kind of like progressed pretty well out there in Long Island, certain areas, more so than from years ago?
From what I can see, the gangs are like really been multiplying.
Yeah.
It started in the city when I was there in the 70s, 80s, 90s. And now I noticed that out here, I'm seeing more and more people and more crime and more drugs. Gangs, for instance, most recently in all the news, this violence that was going on with all these young kids being killed in Brentwood. I happen to live not too far from that area, and I hear all these stories on the stations, the Long Island stations and the general stations. It's very... you don't want to hear that. It should put everybody uneasy, and we have to do something. That's, again, comes back to the community. They've got to vote for the right people in office, get the right people going in there. They've got to support their police wholeheartedly, and when they see, not just see something like with 9/11, with the gangs, see something, report it. Don't just sit there. If you think there's an inkling going on, your child comes home and tells them anything, that there might be some gang members trying to put them into the gang or intimidating, and the kid tells you that, go to the police with that information. That's the only way we're going to stop it.
You know, I had a few cases where a client, the parents called me in because their daughter got hooked up with the wrong crowd. And I'm sure you've had a few of them because I know we spoke about that. And sometimes you find them in the wrong element, and hopefully you can get them out of that element before they get worse off. And I know you've had a few of those type of things.
Well, the biggest problem is the peer pressure thing. They get in there and they tell them all, oh, I'm doing it, look at so-and-so's doing it. Come on, what are you, chicken? What are you this, you're that? Come on, try this drug or do that. Come on, it's only one thing. You won't get to, oh, look at what a good time we had. We went to a party, whoa. We can't do that.
Right.
You have to impale upon these children, your children, what's right and wrong. And you have to keep a diligent eye on them.
Yeah.
You've got to keep a good eye on them. And you've got to be strict when it counts.
One of the things that I'd like to ask you in your opinion, we've been through a lot of rules in the police department. Some are good and some are bad. Some have changed to worse and worser. Now, if I had to throw something at you right now, what kind of rule that lately has been the one that would upset a lot of the PD people out there, would you say?
Well, by far, for me, and I'm sure like many of my people like you and I that went through it, stop and frisk. The public does not realize how important that particular thing is. When I worked in uniform in Bed-Stuy as a patrolman, we had the option to stop and frisk. Again, I go back, let me regress to 90% of the people there are hardworking people. And there were 90% of the people that live there are black. 8% were Hispanic, 2% were others. So when I stopped somebody for any reason that I thought he looked suspicious, how could I not stop anybody that wasn't mostly black all the time? Is that profiling? Yes, I call it profiling the bad guys. My gut and my feelings and your feelings as my partner, we were able to check out a guy and say, he looks pretty, I think there's something there. And 90% of the time, guess what?
Well,
there was.
If I could jump in, I think that probably most of the times we got it was from the community.
Yeah.
That they wanted the police to get into the area because drugs and guns were coming out of hand. And not that we would go and force ourselves in there from the PD. I don't know the statistics. But it was always the community that said, I want those police in here. I want it stopped today, so to speak. And that's why you see a enforcement in these areas. The community wanted us in there.
They always wanted it. There was never, the only ones that didn't want us were the 10% of troublemakers.
Right.
The ones who are out, like with this now Black Lives Matter stuff. These are the troublemakers. They're dissidents. They're hired to make trouble either for themselves or by outside interests. And this is we're letting them control the 90% of the good people. We've got to understand that that's something that worked. It worked for years. Now, the statistics will prove when I see all the statistics on TV now and talk to friends in the police department. The arrests have gun arrests have gone down, everything gone down. They don't have that tool to keep the streets safe for you, the general public, you, me, our families. They have to keep it straight. And this is one thing that's a big issue for guys like myself who've lived through it. And I'll condemn it constantly for them not letting us do that job and letting the current police do that job.
Before I forget, I just wanted to add something that I should have added in the beginning. For a many years, you were the president of one of the largest Italian police departments in the city of New York. The Italian organization was probably one of the largest in the police department. You were president for many, many years of that, and I was on your board.
That's right.
And but how did you feel when you were the president so long? And you've done a great job on unifying everybody and getting them together and talking about all the political situations that we have today. You did very well with that, John.
Well, Vito, thank you. I was the longest running president in the history of that organization.
And by the way, I voted for you too, so just let you know.
But you see why I was there 10 years. No one ever went more than 4. You know why? I was the Donald Trump of the police department before it started.
Correct.
I told the members what they were thinking.
Right.
I spoke it out. I let the hierarchy know how I felt, and in turn, my men and women underneath me were feeling.
Right.
And they enjoyed that I was doing that. And that was the answer.
Yes.
And it was a privilege for me to spend that time and to have guys like you on my board.
Well, thank you.
I couldn't have done it alone without good people like you also.
Well, we had a great board, and I remember we all try to get together every so often, 40, 50 of us, and just chop wood for a while and see where we were and how much weight we gained and how much weight we lost and how many gray hairs and all that stuff.
Always, that's what
happens. You got to
happens.
keep together. You know, that's life. You got to keep together. But we had so much experience, and we met so many experienced guys out there and women that we were fortunate in a lot of ways, John, to meet up with these people. And not only from the police itself, but from the Italian organization. And it was incredible because we met every group of police officers in their organizations too. And they all joined us. We were like one bond, one brotherhood, so to speak.
It made us one big cohesive unit, so to speak. And that is in the only way we could do a better job at our job, serving who? John Q. Citizen, the public.
Right.
Most of us weren't that wonderful that we said we want to do it, but it was something that you do, and 99 and 9/10% of all the police officers want to do the right thing and help people. Save. I delivered 6 babies when I was a patrol officer in Bed-Stuy. You know,
I was only 2.
I became a midwife. You know, what am I going to do?
Your feelings right now, John, you've been doing this for a number of years like myself. You want to continue doing private investigative work, or do you have any other thoughts in mind?
No,
Pretty
actually,
much
no.
Solid with that?
I want to continue, and I'm waiting for you to give me a call on our next job.
Okay. Well, I have your number. We keep in touch quite a bit. But it's just interesting of the community, what kind of problems they have. and what goes on in communities, and that's really the focus of what we're trying to do. Now, and from a PI end of it, we meet a lot of different people, and sometimes it's not in the PI end of it, but we can always refer them to other people and organizations
That's correct.
or whatever they need if we know it. And if we don't know, we'll try to get it for them.
Which is good because you get the qualified people. A good
Right.
PI has to be tenacious. It's got to be very inquisitive. Be able, again, like I said, think and chew gum and walk at the same time. You always keep your eye on the prize, what you're doing. Don't get distracted. And by all these things, by our good training from police department training that we carry into this field, we're steps ahead of anybody who's starting on their own without that. That's why 99% of all the investigative companies have retired POs and detectives
Right.
and FBI people working for them.
Correct. Because we have the background, we have the experience in that world.
Absolutely.
And we have to use it because that's what we know best, and that's the avenue we go to. Do you have any other thoughts about anything besides the stop and frisk that you might want to tap on a little bit, or is there anything else in that respect? Or?
Well, what I would like to see, the police department better armed. I mean, when you and I were on, we had our 38s, and they were fine. But even with the Glocks that the new people carry and the automatic, they're not even close to being comparable to what the bad guys are called. So all of a sudden, they're all carrying these semi-automatics and all. I would love to see them have the right to carry some of that weaponry, if not on them in the trunk, to be used in the case they need it.
True.
Because that's the only way you have to fight fire
The
with fire.
only ones that, from my knowledge, would be the emergency service units
Right.
that have the high-powered units, automatics, not the patrol force in general. I don't know what the statistics are, who would carry it today, whether it be a sergeant in the car that have something like a shotgun. I don't know how they implement these
I
things.
don't see that happening, but that's perfect scenario.
Yeah.
At least have the sergeant have some of that weaponry. We have a supervisor in charge of that in the event it's needed. I hope to God that they never need it. But preparation is the key to all success. One of our great generals said that in World War II. I'm old enough to remember that. General Douglas MacArthur.
Very
He
good.
came back. Let's have law enforcement come back. Let's take the streets back from the criminals that are out there. Support them, the public. With the public's help, we could do it. It's a definite thing. It can be done.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that. It's just it's the world of experience. When we meet with other associates that are on PIs, we sometimes collaborate a lot of our stories, and sometimes we can help each other in so many degrees.
That's true.
Your experience, obviously, is tremendous, and I have a certain amount of experience in me.
Yes.
And others that we know out there, especially when you're talking about not only New York City, but also in Suffolk County. You have the high level of law enforcement out there. We're all one brotherhood out here, and we have to take care of ourselves, basically. I mean, we see it all through the country here, killings of police officers, and whatever way that they get killed, whether it be terrorists or whether this is a lone wolf type individual that's categorized as a terrorist. But it's just out of hand. It's just out of hand.
Right.
And everyone's tired of this thing. What are we going to do? We're all tired of this thing. And as a PI, we even have to be careful when we go to the front door of an apartment to see if the witness is there to talk to us. You don't know what's behind that door.
Oh.
It could be like a general thing. I just want to get a statement. But again, it could be someone in that back door that could be wanted for something, and they're thinking you're trying to pick them up. And so we've got to be very, very careful, We're not the armed people out there like the PD. Even they have to be very careful.
Of course.
So you see that always happening, I just wanted to ask you a question. In all the police stories out there, in all the movies, and all the stuff, what would be one of your favorites, if I may throw it at you?
It's not on the air anymore.
What is it?
Barney Miller.
Barney Miller. I loved it.
Barney Miller, with
Right.
all its fun, had tremendous authenticity
Right.
to some of the things that were going on within the police department.
Right.
And they presented it, of course, in a humorous way.
Yeah.
but there was a lot of truth in
There
that.
was a section or two
funny.
that could be realistic.
Kojak was another one
Yeah.
of the more on the
Right,
point.
right.
The new ones today, NCIS and all, you and I didn't live through that. We didn't have all these forensic things. I had an IBM Selectric typewriter like you did. We didn't have all the computers and things to do. So I'm not sure about that.
Do you get any cases right now out in Long Island, and any of those companies are hiring you for any specific PI dealings right now?
Yeah,
that you've
I
had?
worked quite a bit for a couple of insurance companies recently on fraud, people that were feigning injury to themselves. You know,
Right.
one fellow, I see him come out of his house running, go to the car,
Right.
and drive to Manhattan. The next thing I know, he goes to Manhattan out of a garage. He comes out of the garage with a neck brace and a cane,
Right.
walks to the doctor.
Right.
Comes out of the doctor, neck brace and a cane, goes to the car, goes home. 20 minutes later, I'm there taking a picture. He's on a ladder, no neck brace, no cane, and he's fixing his roof. You know, these are people who are frauding.
Sure, sure.
They're crazy.
That-
So it's a lot of that going on also.
Yeah.
And we pay higher rates in insurance
Sure.
because of criminal activity like that.
Exactly. Do you deal directly with insurance companies in a lot of respect?
Sometimes, most of the times, it's through another investigative company like
Okay,
yourself,
right.
who gets hired, and then I do the investigation, or through my company too. They'll come in and they'll say it also.
I would just say that, you know, for what we're doing at the show for Private Investigative World, you obviously have a lot of background on it, and I'm so happy, truthfully, that you're here today. I know the time is tough to get you here, but I worked on you for about a month or so. And then
You were very tenacious.
then you finally said, okay, I'll come down.
Okay.
But our interest is to see our world, private investigator from law enforcement going into it, and how we can help communities out in so many different directions. And that's really what my purpose behind this whole thing is to see what we've done. And I know you've done a lot yourself, and you're still doing things too, and we're just trying to get a focus on your work. And our work is pretty similar in a lot of ways.
Yes.
You know, just the names have changed, like I told you earlier
That's it.
in the show before, like Dragnet, you know, the names have changed to protect the
Absolutely.
innocent.
Right.
So we're pretty well comfortable with this stuff, but you have a lot of background, a lot of experience, John, and I'm really so happy that you're here. And I think what we're going to do is, in the future, we'll probably call you back again to see if you can add it onto something different, give a more specific tone onto certain areas that we're trying to cover, because you got a vast knowledge up there, and we're just trying to take it right out of you if I could do that, you know.
Boy, you're a good butterer-upper, but it's true.
Well,
No,
you know.
but God bless you, and thank you for having me here. And
My pleasure.
I only hope that some people watching this will hear something that'll be interesting to them, that'll stick to them. They'll go out, they'll support their police, and they'll make a call and see something and say something.
Well, I hope so too. We say this enough time, so
That's
thank
it.
you. Good. And I guess that's it. And I want to again thank you. I just didn't know if I could be able to throw another 2 words into this thing. I know the time element here.
I'm listening.
I'm a little, not sure of how this thing goes, but I just want to let you know again and again, thank you. I know a lot of our members were waiting to see you today with me, so I'm hoping we get a high rating in our show so that we can continue to do other shows, and I'm sure we'll get them calling in.
At our next dinner when we get together, we'll hear a lot about
Remember, all lives matter, and that's the thing. We're MadhouseTV.com. Just remember that. And we'll be eventually going to Cablevision Channel 20.
I'm
so
waiting.
let's go.
All right.
All right, we're working on it. All right, John?
it. Thank you.
All right. So thank you very much for seeing us today, and we enjoyed this being here in front of the audience, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. And we're going to come back soon again. It looks like November 16th we'll be back, but I want to tell you it's been a pleasure to see you, John, and to talk. And again, I want to thank the producers of the show, Jerry Parisi and his wife, Michelle. Without them, we wouldn't be sitting here. Thank you very much. Enjoy your evening.